Yes, hello, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for joining the channel once again, and I hope you're all doing well. Now, uh, just to make a simple advertisement, like most of you understand, I'm really, really passionate about African politics, African leadership, and Pan Africanism and things of that sort. So, what I've decided to do is I've decided to create a new channel different from this one to have most of that work to deal with the latest African news, anything else that is taking place around the continent, because as you can realize that what's happening in Uganda is the same thing that is happening in almost the other 52 states that are on the continent. So I believe by drawing examples from different parts of the continent, from different countries, and by different countries uh, coming to watch maybe this particular channel, it will help us to create this sort of network on the entire continent and hearing from different people from different parts of the continent and different parts of the world, giving us ideas on how we can make Uganda better and how we can make our continent better in one way or the other. Especially now that we have seen that the presidents or the dictators on the continent are now conniving to work together. So I believe that we should also be able to forge or find means on how we can bring each other together, especially online, and discuss these issues that are happening in different countries, especially where there are people who are trying to fight for democracy and bring about and end oppression, as well as things that are happening in ending oppression and bringing about democracy and the rule of law in one way or the other. Now, without further ado, I wouldn't like to waste your time. What I've realized right now is that the battle for Museveni has always been about PR, public relations. That is how Museveni has managed to manipulate us for the past 35 years. One of the writers, Helen Epstein, said that Museveni mastered the art of manipulating the West, of manipulating these Western countries and twisting the story in one way or the other. The reason as to why Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, His Excellency Bobby Wine, has managed to beat Museveni in 3 years, it is because he has debunked every theory that Museveni has always been putting forward in order to justify his long stay in power and things of that sort. Now, the battle for public relations, or the battle for communication, or PR, Museveni started it way back in 1980, around 1989, when Ronald Reagan was in power. According to Helen Epstein, she says that Museveni hired Ronald Reagan's, the son-in-law to Ronald Reagan had a lobbyist firm in Washington that Museveni hired their services. Ever since then, Museveni got very close to the Reagan administration, and given the fact that this PR firm was connected to Ronald Reagan, he managed to enjoy this sort of connection that even connected him to Britain and as well as the United States of America. So he managed to visit Washington over like something like 4 or 5 times. Right? Washington, he managed to visit it 4 or 5 times. Now, when I was reading about that thing, I really realized how Museveni really did that thing. Because what he did is, this is Ronald Reagan's son-in-law. The vice president of Ronald Reagan is George H.W. Bush. When Ronald Reagan leaves power, George H.W. Bush takes power. So Museveni, it was more like a continuation. So whatever was happening during all that time, Museveni had already set himself and connected himself. And according to Helen Epstein, she says that Museveni became the West's biggest darling for over 30 years. Like for 30 years, Museveni has been the biggest ally for the Americans, as well as the European Union, as well as the British. So he managed to entrench himself in power in such a manner. So how does Museveni fight his PR battle? He does not need PR on ground in Uganda, no. He needs international PR. By making international PR, he's able to manipulate stories, flip stories, make them in his favor, and then vilify other people. And as a matter of fact, what happens is, in the end, he manages to capture the attention of the Western governments and increase donor aid or donor money in one way or the other. Uganda is a begging country. It is never a country that the whites or these people are really much interested in investing in. That is why you see, given that our economy is a beggar's economy, we are always looking to all these machinations that Museveni does, basically to beg more money and more aid, and for the West to look the other way whenever he commits actions against humanity and things of that sort. And by using these PR connections or using these lobbyist firms, Museveni has managed to secure jobs for different people within his government, because we have seen this. He has so many people within the BBC. He has so many people working in Washington on different desks. Because all of a sudden we have been fighting these people, but all of a sudden you go and see there is a Ugandan working on the desk, but actually this Ugandan is Ugandan but of Rwandese heritage, and then you wonder why things are not moving in different parts of the world. Things are not moving in Washington. Things are not moving in London. All these past years, but now what we are seeing now is that there is a very big shift. The fact that Ugandans are very interested in what is happening in their country, number one. Secondly, is the fact that the advance of new mediums of PR or communication, that is to do with social media and all this kind of stuff, because most of these lobbyists do not have control over these particular mediums. And if at all they try to twist the story, or if at all they try to spin the story in favor of Museveni, if these people are like the Twitter protests that Ugandans are doing today, where they go on a particular Twitter handle of a particular lobbying firm, and then they will go there and provide tweets to these lobbyists. They provide tweets to senators. They provide tweets to MPs and all this kind of stuff. So if at all the lobbying firm told you something different, and you see Ugandans sharing all this information, then there's you make it hard for Museveni. That is why you see now the battle is with PR. So ever since 1989, Museveni, when he started soliciting PR services from different governments, especially in America is the biggest donor to Uganda, as well as Britain. Even today, last week he hired a new PR firm. This firm he has been using it for quite a while. It's called Machule LLC. It has its headquarters here in the UK as well as in America. He has been using it for a while to spin his stories, but this time things got so heated that he had to rehire them back in one way or the other. Now, according to the Daily Monitor, as you can see, it says that government hires PR firm to clean up Uganda's image. Now, this is what it says. Government has hired an international public relations firm, Machule International UK Limited, a subsidiary of Machule Public Affairs, to improve its image on the international scene. Documents seen by this reporter show that when Uganda hired Machule International Limited, it subcontracted its mother firm, Machule Public Affairs, to do the job. This signals that the focus of lobbying will be in the US. Machule Public Affairs submitted its agreement with the subsidiary to the U.S. Justice Department on April 26, 2021. In the U.S. Foreign Agents Registration Act requires lobbyists of foreign governments who are engaged in political activities or other activities specified under the statute to make periodic public disclosure of their relationship with foreign principal, as well as activities, receipts, and disbursements in support of those activities. It's the Counterintelligence and Export Control Section, CES, unit of the National Security Division in the Department of Justice, blah, 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 blah. Now, the term of this agreement shall begin on April 22nd, 2022, and will continue in effect until May 2021. So it means it is on a monthly basis. The term of this agreement shall automatically continue every month thereafter, unless terminated in accordance herewith. It further reads, the UK firm will be paying the US firm on a monthly basis for the services rendered. The agreement says it does not reveal the amount that Uganda will be paying. The government, through Machule International Relations UK Limited, is listed as a foreign principal, blah, 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 blah. This move was made a week after the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken slapped visa restrictions against the unnamed Ugandan officials over human rights violations orchestrated during and after the 2021 elections. As well, we have covered all that stuff. Now, when asked about hiring a PR firm for lobbying, Oliem urged that that's not strange. My brother, all countries across the world would hire private companies and institutions to work for them, including what you're saying, lobbying. There is nothing unusual, he said. Uganda's government faced a barrage of criticism for international human rights organizations and donor governments over the electoral process and abductions of opposition supporters. But also Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, who was the leading opposition candidate, got favorable press coverage in one way or the other. So that's what Olema said. Now, when you see, according to lobbying, with the way Museveni bashes the West, at times you might think that, oh, maybe Museveni doesn't get any help from these governments. But his foreign minister is saying that, look here, everyone does lobbying, meaning that Museveni gets help from these countries. Last year but one, he got almost $1 billion from the Americans. Americans are the biggest funders of Uganda. It is the biggest country that funds Uganda. I mean, it's in terms, no other country matches their donations. So Museveni needs these donations to survive. So that's why he's putting more focus on the United States, because the United States has been more proactive against his dictatorship, especially under the Biden administration, than any other administration. So that is what is happening. Now, the battle is in public relations. Now, there is something that Ugandans had started on Twitter, whereby they go after these companies and they tweet images. And they tweet images of people that are being murdered and people that are being killed in one way or the other. Now, these images have really done a good job of really showing who Museveni. Hold on. So the images that Ugandans have been tweeting on Twitter and putting them out there, they have really helped to make it hard for these lobbying companies to spin their so-called stories. Now, this is what happened. The previous lobbyist to Machule was called Scribe Strategies, headed by a gentleman known as Joseph Slavic. Now, Ugandans on Twitter, or Ugandans, not on Twitter, but Ugandans went on Twitter and went on Slavic's Twitter account and posted images of Ugandans that were killed, headlines of different news agencies talking about Museveni's dictatorships and things of that sort. Now, what happened that is interesting is the fact that when they posted all these things, Slavic, I think, was fired. Afterwards, we saw he was no longer posting things about Uganda, and then all of a sudden we saw that Museveni had hired Machule. And the fact that Scribe Strategies also failed in blocking these visa restrictions, it was seen as a weakness by Museveni that Scribe Strategies maybe no longer has the so-called kind of connections and links they used to have. But the gentleman at Scribe is also very shoddy and, is not a straightforward guy. He has so many criminal, he has been indicted for particular criminals and things of that sort. But that's not the point. So the point is this, that the battle now is on PR. Machule is one of the top PR companies in the United States of America, although it is based in the UK. So the subsidiary in America is working on behalf of the one in the UK. So they went through the Machule UK company here to hire their services to work in the US. I don't know if it makes sense. But this is what is important, that Museveni really needs the US to be on his side. So where does that leave the UK? So when we went on Twitter to protest against these companies, they were blocking each and every one who was posting anything on their pages. So it means that they don't want any backlash from people. So what is interesting is the fact that they were actually literally blocking people and deleting comments, but they got overwhelmed that they couldn't even delete 1,000 comments and block 1,000 people. So we are waiting to see after this month if their contract will be renewed or not. Now, it's not the first time Museveni has been. Has been hiring PR firms to clean up his image. Now, over a period of time, as you can see in 2000, this was 2005. Really interesting, because when I was making research about this whole thing, when I came across this article, it was really interesting to me. It says Uganda hires PR agency to buff its image. A London PR firm has been hired to polish the image of the Ugandan government, which is wrestling with a civil war, a tarnished human rights record, and a wave of criticism from Western media and human rights groups. Museveni, who has led the country for 19 years, is under fire for failing to make peace with the rebels in the north and promoting policies which favor abstinence over condoms for tackling HIV and AIDS. The British government recently cancelled £5 million of aid because of concerns about democracy. This is when the British government was still sober, that it would actually cancel aid in terms of... Do you know what they did with Museveni on what happened last year? They cancelled aid as well. Guess how much? No, you give me a figure. Guess how much? £40,000. That's all they cancelled. But a year before, they gave Museveni over £150 million in terms of aid. This was 2005. They cancelled £5 million. This year, 2021, they cancelled £40,000 because of concerns about democracy. Most damaging of all, perhaps, was criticism of Sir Bob Geldof, who urged Mr. Museveni to get a grip and step down from power. But Uganda has found a solution. The government is to spend £350,000 brushing up its image. In today's money, that must be up to something like £650,000. Hill and Knowlton, one of the world's biggest PR firms, will be working with the government trying to build bridges with lobby groups such as Human Rights Watch, which has been very critical of Museveni. Now, here is the kicker. The PR firm has itself been criticized in the past for working with governments such as Indonesia and Turkey, whose human rights records are dubious. That's not enough. But look, listen, this is my best paragraph out of this article in 2005, and it has actually explained a lot of things to me. Now, Hill and Knowlton yesterday confirmed its contract with the Ugandan government. James Barber, Associate Director, said, "What we are doing is encouraging dialogue between the Ugandan government and people like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, Oxfam." If I mention Oxfam, does it ring a bell to you? Well, I'll tell you why. It's not about spinning a different version of the truths. It's about making sure that Ugandans are having the right conversations with the right people. Uganda, where political parties have been tightly controlled in the past, is due to hold multi-party elections next year. But Mr. Museveni has been accused of seeking constitutional changes that will permit him to run for president again. This was before Museveni actually removed the term limits and things of that sort. Now, why is this very important? This is 2005. Right? And this is when these Western governments were really sober about Museveni and all the atrocities he had committed in the north. But by then we didn't have social media or things of that sort. But what kicked my mind is the fact that these lobbyist firms are engaging organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and above all is Oxfam. Now, guess what? A few years later, Winnie Byanyima, Museveni's tight friend, quote unquote, all of a sudden becomes the director of Oxfam. Now, she has been in that position for quite a long time, and afterwards she became the director of UNAIDS. And all these positions, for someone to get these positions, to be in these positions, you're supposed to get recommendation from a president of your particular country, which is Uganda in this case. That is the reason as why I told you that Museveni has strategically positioned people in different agencies, the media, international media agencies. He has positioned them in lobbying agencies in Washington, in Downing Street, as well as in international, multinational agencies like Oxfam, UNAIDS, and all these organizations. Whereby if we, the poor Ugandans, go there to bring out our case, you see that the case is not moving. No, why is it not moving? All of a sudden, what is happening is this gentleman has already positioned these people to block all these cases. Do you ever wonder why Byanyima is not very vocal about the situation that is in Uganda? You will see her posting about Myanmar, posting about other countries, but she rarely posts about what is taking place in Uganda. Don't ask me why. Anyway, the other article that was quite interesting that caught my eye is the fact that this is the other one. This was in 2014, BuzzFeed. Uganda hires DC PR firm following sanctions over anti-LGBT law. The $600 contract with Machule LLC is to monitor coverage and lobby on behalf of President Museveni and Uganda. Now, 1 month after the US government announced the substantial sanctions against Museveni in response to the Anti-Homosexuality Act, the government of Yoweri Museveni has signed a contract with the DC consulting firm Machule to help with public relations and lobby in the United States. Uganda signed a 1-year contract with worth $600,000 on July 17th, according to federal disclosure filings. Message to Machule representatives were not immediately returned, blah, 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 blah. Now, this is what happens. It seems, or what it looks like is, Uganda's policies are made from lobbyists. So this is what I tell people, that in Uganda, it is Museveni and his family that make decisions, and the lobbyists are his real advisors. These so-called the senior presidential advisors, those ones, it is Museveni who sits there. Those are just positions of patronage. You are there just to earn money. He doesn't need your advice. The only advice Museveni takes is the advice he gets from lobbyists. It is the lobbyists that spin the stories. It is the lobbyists that calm the situation down. It is the lobbyists that write his speeches and tell him what to do and what to say. They tell him, steer things up, but then afterwards, we shall come and calm the situation. That is the trick. And that's how he has played the West for over 35 years. And all of a sudden, he has managed to infiltrate the West, and he has managed to make sure that he gives them incentives and things of that sort in mining deals, in businesses, waiving taxes and all that kind of stuff. So this was in 2014, hiring Machure, the same company he hired this time to come and help him with Bobby Wine. Now I will end with this one. I think all of you should look at this. U.S. history of support for Museveni. American support for Museveni went back to the beginning of his rule. In October 1987, Museveni was greeted with full honors on Capitol Hill when he visited Washington and met with President Ronald Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush. Museveni at that time hired a public relations firm owned by Reagan's son-in-law, Dennis Revaux, to buff up his image, and 2 years later spent time at Reagan's ranch. Can you imagine? Not everyone is being invited at Reagan's ranch, or not everyone will be invited at Mar-a-Lago. So if you are invited at Mar-a-Lago, you just know that you have been accepted. By receiving an invitation to Reagan's ranch, it's an indication that, okay, America has accepted you. Journalist Helen Epstein wrote that since the meeting with Reagan, Museveni has had far more contact with high-level American and British officials than any other living African president. Between 1989 and 1992, the Bush administration provided over $183 million in economic aid to Uganda. A lot of money was illegally funneled to Rwanda Patriotic Front, to see exilees backed by the CIA. They carried out an illegal invasion of Rwanda from Ugandan territory in October 1990, with the goal of unseating the Hutu-led government of Juvenal Habyarimana, supported by France. During the H.W. Bush administration's last year in office, the White House asked Congress for a 33% increase in international military education and training budget of $200,000 to train Museveni's officers, primarily Rwandan Tutsis in Museveni's army. In September 1992, a personal assistant to Museveni was apprehended by U.S. Customs trying to procure 400 U.S. TOW missiles and 34 launchers, which were being obtained for the RPF in violation of the UN arms embargo. Now, that is Museveni for you. In March 1988, President Clinton chose let me finish this one and then I'll end with this. The Justice Department later dropped the case after being pressured by Clinton's State Department, suggesting the operation was overseen by Pentagon or CIA. In March 1998, President Museveni chose Kampala symbolically as the site for an African summit, where he praised Museveni as a generation of new African leaders, supposedly committed to free markets and democracy. The New York Times reported at the time that Museveni's style of self-reliant government and fiscal discipline, as well as free market economies, has made him a darling of United States diplomats who are trying to remold America's role in Africa to replace costly paternalistic aid programs with more trade and investment. Talk about puppets. Talk about puppets. This is a very good article from Covert Action magazine that wrote this article. Now, there's something else that you'll understand here about the issue of PR. Okay? The issue of PR. There's somewhere it says on how Museveni managed to use this lobbyist firm, and people would twist stories and make the Obote government look to be the worst, and yet Museveni was also committing crimes, right? So that's the one that I'm trying to look for here, right? Because they cover up most of these things and they create a facade, and here it is. Museveni became particularly skilled in the use of propaganda and manipulation of foreign media, which depicted the conflict between the NRM and the forces of Milton Obote, Uganda's president from 1980 to 85, in Manichean terms, even though both sides committed horrendous atrocities. London's Observer, which had criticized Obote in the harshest terms, issued glowing articles about Museveni, characteristically with titles like "Polite Gorillas End 14 Years of Torture and Killing" and "The Pearl of Africa Shines Again." So the manipulation of media, especially foreign media, has been a tactic of Museveni. And that is why we are fighting so hard to counter this manipulation, propaganda, on every platform. Ugandans have now even gone to TikTok. We are on YouTube, we are on Facebook, everywhere. This is the only way we're supposed to suffocate any autocrat or any dictator like Museveni. So, as I wind up this video, I want to let you know that the battle now has become specifically about PR, public relations. Because Museveni would not need a PR firm if at all he was doing well. He would not need to hire one of the most if at all what he was doing was really good. You only need a PR firm if at all your image is really tainted and bad. And the fact that these things that people are talking about are real, they are not made up, that is what makes the situation more tighter and more worse for the dictator. So, to me, this is very interesting, and I really enjoyed reading this, and the fact that Museveni is now becoming proactive, and so he's becoming reactive to, and we are more proactive. He's working. That is why you see he wants negotiations. All those are PR stunts. That's why when you go to visit, he makes sure he takes a picture and all those things. All those are PR stunts. So the battle is all about PR now. Do whatever you can to expose the government. Do whatever you can to tell people about Museveni. And whatever he speaks, that's why you see whenever he made up a story of 189 killed Al-Shabaab militants, we came out here, rebuffed that story. People in Somalia said there is no Al-Shabaab militant that has been killed. All of a sudden, they retracted the story. Why? PR. Because they know that if you talk about killing Al-Shabaab, it makes a lot of news in the West, in foreign media, and it pumps up his image. So when you kill that story there and then, bang, he has nothing to rely on. And these are his lobbyists that are advising him. Okay, guys, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope now you know where we can go from here, what we can do from here in one way or the other, and making sure that we fight together, making sure that we let our people know what is happening in the country and all over the continent. Now, for those of you who are interested in the news that is happening all over the continent, I will leave a link somewhere in the description below to subscribe to that channel, and for those of you to know my opinions on different things that are happening all over the continent and what is the latest news or anything that is happening in the continent that is interesting, that should be of our interest, because I have realized that we also need to know about what is happening where in order to understand how to deal with what's happening in Uganda. Thank you very much, guys and ladies and gentlemen, and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.